walk in the cloud.
Everyone is talking cloud these days, but are they talking sense? In this series, we're talking transformation from a practical point of view, offering advice and examples to the executives who want to harness the power of the cloud for their businesses. This is Ellen Bencard with A Walk in the Cloud. So today we're looking through a chief operating officer's eyes with a particular view towards manufacturing and supply chains. Our walk is with the appropriately named Maddie Walker. Maddie, you lead a unit for Accenture in the UK called Industry X. What in simple language does that do?
Good question. In a nutshell, it's about the future of making things and the things that we make. So it's about helping industry and manufacturing companies and industrial companies to shape kind of their fifth industrial revolution by embedding intelligence in the way they make things and how they improve the things it makes to do more using less and keeping people safe and ensuring a sustainable future. So it's really about using intelligence to make things better and to influence the kind of things that we make. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there are all sorts of cool things to unpick there, but before we do, I specifically mentioned COOs in my introduction, but from that introduction, it sounds like Industry X could interest a whole broad group of people. So tell me, who else are you talking to who might turn up at a board table?
Yeah, given the breadth of our remit, we're really looking at many of the different roles that you would see on the board. I mean, clearly the COO is fundamental and to all of these topics. But so is the CTIO, the CTO, the Chief Information Officer, Chief Product Officer. And actually, even the CEO and the CFO is sort of building and making relevant and sustainable products is really at the heart and health of many of the businesses that we work for.
Building into that trend that everybody is connected with technology these days.
Exactly.
So this is called A Walk in the Cloud. So let's start with exploring cloud and the intelligence that you're talking about. How does cloud play into that landscape?
Yeah, if I take a step back on this one, it's worth thinking about that with every industrial revolution, there's always been some changes that we need to master. So when we talk fourth industrial revolution, we were talking about how you digitize and connect, But as the fifth industrial revolution is approaching, we need intelligence. And intelligence has created all sorts of new kinds of disruption, but also most importantly, actually, new opportunities. And it's brought new life to physical machinery and connected products, which allow us to digitize the manufacturing and operations and create software-enabled products. And actually, cloud is at the heart of this, because by harnessing the cloud and all the data that exists on the cloud, it enables us to create that intelligence and to change the way things are made.
Great answer. So I know that manufacturing and supply chains have been areas that have been particularly challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic. Have companies with a high proficiency in cloud done better than others?
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID-19, we're all aware, manufacturing and supply chains have been hit particularly hard by the COVID pandemic. The sheer complexity of today's global supply chains means they've been particularly disrupted. We saw it happen really fast in the high-tech sector, which actually is a company that's really switched on around cloud, but actually China created the majority of the chips for the world's products. They shut their borders a year ago and it was on the front page, because it disrupted a number of supply chains. What we're seeing today is the companies that are surviving and thriving in this field have actually built resilience into that supply chain. And what I mean by that is that they've got, say, multiple plants and sites that they can rely on. They can easily shift production to a different site or a plant if it's more impacted than another. And they can only do this if they've got the intelligence to do it. So, if the business has got the operational data from the plants, factories, the supply chain, they can do the shift. And none of this is possible without the data from the cloud. So what we're seeing is many clients really adapting and adjusting and responding to that right now. Say particularly in life sciences, for example, and consumer goods, we're seeing them shift really quickly to think about how to make this happen so they can thrive given COVID.
And can you give us any examples? You don't need to use any specific client names because I don't want to give away anybody's operational advantages. But what have you seen that you think has been particularly good amongst our client base?
So I think we are talking to some of the large consumer and beverage companies about how they think about and do things differently, specifically around how they use operational technologies on a specific line or in a specific plant that really does enable them to respond to this and do this quicker. So they are able to handle those peaks and troughs more effectively.
Now, let me move a little bit more towards manufacturing once the supply chain gets the parts to where it's going. Um, let's be honest, industry and manufacturing are not words that often get associated with the modern UK, despite its history in this. Should we be thinking more about manufacturing and the UK?
Yeah, and I think Britain does manufacture, right? I know we've got a very large services sector, but I think sometimes people almost underestimate that. I mean, we really do specialise kind of in the high tech precision manufacturing that helps to underpin our growth, right? Think about the auto sector. We talked about consumer goods already. Life sciences, think AstraZeneca, for example, in terms of what they're doing right now, but also GlaxoSmithKline. High tech, aerospace and defence, all the work we're doing with some of our clients there, think of the BAE and the Rolls-Royce. That manufacturing base is pretty fundamental. And yeah, they are looking to grow and develop and get bigger, I would say, and become a bigger part of the UK PLC. But I think it's certainly very relevant in Britain at the moment, and we are working with clients in the aerospace and defence sector, for example, to really help them think about how they build that digital factory of the future and test it using, in terms of building the next generation aeroplanes and fighter jets and all of that good stuff. So I think it's giving the manufacturing sector in Britain a bit of a hard time.
If the profile of manufacturing has changed, then so presumably have the people working in manufacturing. Tell me a little bit more about the people you're working with and the people who are reporting to them. What are their IT skills like? How are they reacting and using the cloud? And what sort of skills do they need to do that?
Yeah. So I think firstly, it's worth thinking about the general trend in manufacturing. So, for a number of years, there's been a general shift to it being offshore. I think part of what's happened in the pandemic has triggered a different behavior where in terms of building resilience in the supply chain and building resilience in terms of manufacturing plants, companies are looking about what can they bring onshore. Obviously, the cost base is different, but what we are having a number of conversations, increasing conversations with our clients about is how can they harness the intelligence and the robotics to require less people onshore. So if that makes sense, we move the factory back onshore. We have a lot more focus on robotics and intelligence. So there's a lot more technology-based jobs to enable that robotics and intelligence, and therefore fewer people doing kind of a traditional manufacturing role. So I think huge opportunity for individuals in terms of building out those very specific kind of cloud-based OT, intelligence, data, AI type of skills to enable them to do roles in this new world around the digital factories.
Yeah, sounds like a really exciting space to be growing into. Now I have to bring up the B word and talk Brexit. We didn't know the pandemic was coming. We did try to prepare for Brexit. Wondering what you're seeing. Certainly, supply chains and Brexit are making the news, and supply chains don't often get into the news.
Yeah, I think Brexit, the pandemic, has all influenced the broader macroeconomic outlook. It's all got a role in it. I mean, the UK government's making huge investments in sustainable industry, manufacturing, and the construction sector. I mean, all of which is going to benefit from the new digital technologies in the cloud. In fact, one of our biggest growing sectors is our capital projects group, which work in highly capex intensive industries. Think about road, rail, and actually the use of data, information, and modelling enabled by the cloud, which really helps to shape and build these kind of what are 10-year programs, makes a fundamental difference to the success of that program. So thinking about how to do these programs in a sustainable and intelligent way, really using data, makes a massive difference. And a lot of that is enabled by where the government is focusing its investment and the type of areas it wants to look at. So we're expecting to see lots of focus around capital programs, which is sort of adjacent to but kind of complementary to the manufacturing sector that we're looking at. I think the other thing to consider with Brexit is also the impact on the supply chain and the impact of customs. I mean, there's still work to do there, but if you look at how we can use the cloud, digital and AI to really streamline and simplify those checks, to create the invisible border that obviously is what people are aspiring to, hopefully you'll see many of these kind of problems we're seeing right now to being resolved over time. So the use of cloud and blockchain and new technologies to make that work would be interesting. And actually, one thing that was quite interesting is I listened to the news this morning, and there's an interview about free ports with the mayor in, I think it was Teesside, and they're really exploring how you can invest in free ports, which will enable kind of these kind of digital spaces within ports to really think about how you do things differently there as well. So I think there's loads and loads of, which relies on connectivity, it relies on 5G, it relies on the cloud. So I think there's actually loads and loads of opportunity growing to really think about how the UK does things differently. It's quite exciting.
It's a huge opportunity, but I bet there are lots of challenges in there as well. What stumbling blocks are coming up most frequently with the clients you're working with?
Gosh. Where do you start? Yeah. I mean, in terms of taking advantage of the cloud, if that's what we're talking about, I think it's really around, complex legacy systems, investment budgets, the availability and the cleanliness of the data that exists today. I mean, that's a huge one. There is data out there, but how useful is it? How meaningful is it? How up to date is it? How refreshed is it? How do you actually make sure you've got that clean set of data to draw the intelligence from is hugely important. So what we're working with a lot of clients on is about how do you get that clear route map of how to move to the cloud and really harness the benefit of the technology. How do you identify the business benefits and get the use case identified so it becomes completely self-evident about what's needed to be done. I think the important thing about the cloud is it's pervasive, right? It's how it is used within an industry and a sector to drive that kind of business benefit, and actually really bringing that to life through the use cases and what you want to use it for is fundamental and is critical. And that's where we're seeing our clients be successful, where they're going, let's invest, but without that kind of business lens as well. I think it's harder to make that impact and get that sustained focus to make the change.
And it's great to hear themes coming up from some of our earlier episodes. So I would encourage listeners to go back to our episode on data, which fits right into what you just said there, Maddie. Last question for you now. To avoid the challenges that you've just described, how should a company's view of its COO change? If you were in charge of the job description, and I know we talked about lots of people, but just let's use the COO as an example. If you were going to change his or her job description in a world of transformative cloud, what kind of bullet points would you put in there?
I think increasingly the role of a COO is also to be a transformation director too. You do have separate transformation directors and there's a real role for that. But if the COO is not 100% behind that transformation and really wakes up every day thinking about how do you transform your business to do it differently, to do things better, then it's very hard for business to change. So for me, the role of a COO is understanding how they want to use the data and information better so you can truly spotlight performance and change, and how you use cloud to enable that. The real trick here is about how you drive a change into the business and make sure it sticks and it's sustainable, and that is the role of the COO. So that's what I would focus on.
Well, we'd love to have one of those transformed COOs on our podcast someday. We'll have the call out for him or her. Maddie, thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise. This has been great.
Thank you.
If you're interested in high-tech manufacturing, supply chain, or operations, do follow Maddie Walker on LinkedIn. You can also keep an eye on news and thought leadership from Accenture in this area by searching Industry X on our website. Next time, Nicole Knott will be my walking companion as I dig into the question of what in the world cloud has to do with human resources. Pretty much everything, it turns out.
Walk in the Cloud.